समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Snehesh Alex Philip. If all goes well, by the end of 2026 or early 2027, India and France will sign a government-to-government deal for the procurement of 114 Rafale fighter jets. Of these 114, 18 are likely to come in flyaway condition from France, while the rest are to be manufactured in India. Now, this deal is expected to cost the Indian exchequer around rupees 3.25 lakh crore. And this deal has really, caused a hot splash out in the social media, with many being critical of this deal, saying that it is too expensive, many saying that we should have gone in for the Su-57 fifth generation fighter aircraft that the Russians are offering, or I should say alleged fifth generation fighter aircraft that the Russians are offering. Some say that we should focus on AMCA, and many say that this is expensive. But then there are many who understand why this deal is so important and significant. I'd done a story and a video earlier on the whole journey, because Rafale is a 25 years journey of lot of upheavals, lack of decision making, and it's only now that the Air Force is finally going to get something that it really wanted 25 years ago. And to carry forward this discussion further, to understand why Rafale is so significant and what this deal really means for India as a country, I have with me Air Marshal Diptendu Choudhury. Welcome to the print, sir.
Thank you so much, Snehesh. It's nice to be back on the screen with you again after a long break.
Thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you. Readers, before for those who don't know Air Marshal Chaudhry, he's been a career fighter pilot. I would say a hardcore fighter pilot. He's someone I would say he's part of the, he's more Russian than any of us, because all his life he's flown the MiG-21, the MiG-27, and the Sukhoi, that is a Su-30 MKI. So he's really Russian per se. That's on a lighter vein, sir. But you've also done the Mirages as well as the Jaguars too, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, actually, to include your Russian list, I was also operational on the MiG-29 as well. So having flown the entire range of that. But my job profile and my career profile in the Air Force also had me spend a significant of my time in the two establishments. One is TACD, which is you're aware of, India's equivalent of the Tactics and Air Combat Development Establishment, and the what we call as the Operational Inspection Organization of the Audit Organization of the Air Force. That is the ACS Inspection and the DASI. So I have had an opportunity to fly all these platforms in their purely operational roles, and on how we employ them. So yeah, I got a fair heads up into what the country and what the Air Force certainly needs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir. My first question to you is, you are someone who's flown, of course, the Su-30 MK, and you were a Su-30 pilot, right? Uh, this whole, you call it the MRFA or you call it the MMRCA 2.0 or the MMRCA. It all started, immediately after the Kargil conflict. And that was also a time when the Su-30 MKI, had started coming in, right? The contract was initiated somewhere in 96 or 97, if I'm not mistaken, right? So why did the Air Force at that time, when they're already getting a Su-30, MKI, why did the Air Force want a Mirage like an aircraft or more Mirages at that particular point of time? I'm assuming the Su-30 would have been the most modern at that point of time.
Yes, certainly, Snehesh. Actually, I was in the first lot uh, who went to Russia to train on the Sukhois. But do understand the version we got from Russia at that point in time was Su-30K, the older version, the two-seat version. That was not what Air Force actually wanted in the long run.
Oh,
So that is why, yeah, what we are flying today is the Su-30 MKI, the MK India, which took over a decade of development because it has avionic, Israeli avionics. So the whole lot is an integration of all kinds of systems which we wanted tailored to our requirement of the Su-30 aircraft. So it is not that the aircraft which we bought was entirely, a Russian copy. It was something which we evolved and developed tailored to the Air Force's needs. But you will also appreciate that that platform fitted into a heavyweight, high-end platform. It was most certainly an advanced platform of its time. It had enormous capabilities in terms of air-to-air and air-to-ground capabilities. But you will also appreciate that there was a need. And the other end, we had the MiG-21s in the largest numbers. And we knew for the longest time, in fact, over 3 decades ago, that's the time we really started pursuing the Tejas, that we wanted something in the interim. Now, yes, there was this decision dilemma at certain point whether we should go additionally for purchase of additional Mirages, which served us very well, and they still are serving us. But there were challenges in that as well. So at that point in time, Rafale was seen as a futuristic platform which would meet the requirements of the Air Force in this interim in between category between the heavyweight Su-30 and the lighter weight the MiG-21 and subsequently the Tejas.
okay.
So that is how we looked at it. And it was a twin engine platform. The Tejas was a single engine platform. We wanted a twin engine platform. The Mirage was a single engine platform. So there were a whole lot of other complexities, And, there are people who very simplistically who don't know what the Indian Air Force really needs, what its threat scenarios are, what are its roles and, requirements, who make the simplistic assumptions. Oh, we should have either bought this or we should have bought that. So only one thing I will sort of like to mention here, and I want to mention it to put it across to all our listeners, that the purchase of any fighter aircraft by the Indian Air Force is not just an Air Force decision. It's a strategic decision taken at the highest level, which involves geopolitics in a big way, because it is not just the large money involved, it is also the technology and who are you sort of partnering with in this defense deal. So it was never really the Air Force's choice, which always get tick marked first. It's an outcome of a whole lot of other geopolitical factors of that time when the deal is signed. So there may be changes in the government from when requirement is envisaged to the delivery or the subsequent purchase. So these are the challenges which we don't usually most people don't sort of consider, when they look into aircraft deals, fighter aircraft deals.
So, one thing that I noticed in what you said was the fact that there are many people who say that this Rafale deal is a way to kill the Tejas LCA program, right? So what you said is that we had the Sukhois, which were on the heavyweight category fighters. Then the Air Force had envisaged a medium weight category, and the Tejas was the lightweight category, right? These are the three categories of aircraft that the Rafale that the Air Force was working on. So it is wrong to assume that the Rafale deal is killing the Tejas deal.
Absolutely. I want to clarify one more thing here. Initially, when the Tejas was envisaged, it was pure replacement for the MiG-21s. So the MiG-21 had a very specific niche role, lightweight fighter, short range, limited capability. Limited air-to-air and air-to-ground capabilities, which was a sort of meant our short-term requirements in our borders. But over the years, you will also appreciate the fighter platforms have developed the world over, and we no longer have pure, most fighter aircraft today are multi-role. And the more multi-role fighters we have with greater capabilities, so it's more cost effective because you get both roles in one. So that is why this whole, the middle level category came in, and that's why the first deal of 126 Rafale aircraft was envisaged in the same manner. But there's a challenge here. When we look at, it's not just the weight categories. Well, it's also the platform capabilities, what weapons systems can be integrated and where does it fit in. So that becomes a defining factor on the threat perception that we have. To understand, unlike most countries, we have a twin adversary threat. And both our adversaries have fairly strong air forces today, and advanced air forces. So this is something which the Air Force had envisaged long back, and that's when they chose to go in for for a Rafale deal. This is almost like you mentioned in your piece. The history is there, laid bare,
Yeah.
and that's how it is.
So, I'll be the devil's advocate here. Now, you speak about upgrades, right? It's also not just about the weight of the aircraft. What it means is the capability and the possible of future upgrades that are there, right? So, one counter argument to the whole Rafale deal, and which many keep openly stating on the social media, especially on X, is the fact that, boss, you're not getting any source code from Dassault Aviation, right? So what about source code? We are now left with an aircraft where we'll be, where we can't use to integrate our own weapon systems there, present one as well as future. What would you say to those critics, sir?
Okay, I'll just go back, sort of roll back to the previous question, because when you also mentioned that the Rafale deal is killing the Tejas deal, I think that's an absolutely misplaced notion from people who have not really thought things through. Yes, do understand one fact, that we have lost a decade plus in the intransigence of our ability to come to a decision of what should we go for. If we had gone back to the Rafale deal, if we had gone through the Rafale deal, 126 aircraft Rafale deal, where would that have put us? Where was the Tejas at that point in time? Okay, the technologies that come with a platform are enormous, and especially if you have a platform which is at its time the latest platform, obviously has legs for future, both in terms of avionics and systems upgrade as well as advanced weapon integrations in the future. So it would have opened up an ecosystem within India where the defense Indian aviation industry would have benefited enormously. But look what happened. At that point in time, the Rafale deal got into grief. India and HAL was very active in the FGFA deal. That didn't go through. So where did it leave us? We left us with a vacuum of almost 1.5 decades in which we went nowhere. And the Tejas, which we have flying right now, is the Tejas Mark 1. What we need is the Mark 1 Alpha, which has not yet come. And the Mark 2 is still a futuristic thought, which is yet to fly. So, the
airframe is ready, and it's
airframe is ready. Yes,
and
yes.
they have said that they will make it fly this year, though the first flight was promised in 2022.
Absolutely, Snehesh. The problem with these timelines are that, it's a very simplistic timeline. Oh, it is flown. My God, by the time the aircraft gets fully loaded, inducted, and operationalized, and our aircrew train on it, it's a long-time process. So just saying that even if it flies this year, it's a long way of entering the Indian Air Force flight lines as an operational platform. So the point is, where do you go from here? So the Tejas has its own timelines. We are squeezed in with the engines. We know that. We have seen. Now, the problem is, every time you project this problem, people have answers. Oh, we have got the engines have started coming. Oh, they will roll out at this point in time. When will we get to the production scales we need? That is still, nowhere in sight. So, it would have made more sense if you had gone in for the Rafale deal then. Okay, we didn't. We lost this decade plus in this interim period. if we don't go into a collaboration at this point in time, a sort of a joint venture at this point in time, this will run parallelly. This has got nothing to do with the Tejas deal and the Tejas development. If anything, it will give the Indian industry an enormous boost, the wherewithal. Please do understand, because other than the HAL, no one really has expertise in making aircraft, fighter aircraft in India. So this would have opened up, and a fighter aircraft is not just the airframe, the engine, and the avionics. There are a whole lot of smaller subsystems, little parts and pieces, which we need the manufacturing skills, knowledge, and the base for it. We don't have that as yet. So this deal will most certainly help us in doing that. It will not only help the Tejas program, which it would have benefited, in a much greater way if you had gone in the past, but most certainly it will help out the Tejas too, and certainly our AMCA. So it's not a platform seen in isolation. It's the whole ecosystem which comes with it, the expertise, the knowledge base which comes with. It's a very complex thing. Getting interface control documents, subsystems, data flow. How do you? There are a whole lot of aspects into it. So that is what I think we will benefit. So I would like to disagree with people who make the statements. That this will kill that will kill that. There are also a lot of perception biases. See, I have flown a Russian aircraft all my life. I could have as well have flown and said, no, we must go the Russian aircraft way. But I know the challenges of that, of the Russian
What are the
system.
challenges? I'll tell you
See,
why
we've
I'm
had-
asking this question is because, way back in 2016, and I was talking to the senior Air Force officer. And at that time, the whole notion was that after 36 Rafale, the single engine contract will come out, right? For the single engine aircraft. At that time, I had this very senior officer who told me that, Snehesh, the Air Force is not going to fly another Russian aircraft ever. We are not going to procure another Russian aircraft. And then he explained to me why that's the Air Force thinking, right? So so hence I'm asking you. So I would just want to see whether you are both on the same page or not, right?
Okay, I'll put it this way. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who the gentleman is. I can understand the sort of mind space he's come from. But I'd like to say also one thing, as I mentioned earlier, that the choice of the platform finally is not the Air Force's choice. It's a political
Yes.
choice. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get that out of the way. What is the challenge been with Russian platforms in the past is the maintainability, which we have had issues with. And in the earlier days, the older platforms we had, we never would get the full information. The notes were dated. We had a lot of problems in getting hard gen beyond the pure pilot's notes and the pure maintenance manuals. Okay, details of how the missiles work, the radar systems work. Beyond a point, we won't get those information. They were not available to us. But that changed. With the Sukhoi came in a whole lot more transparency, because we were in partnership with the Russians, because we laid down our requirements. So there were several different companies which were working to meet these requirements. So that brought in a whole lot of what should I say, lot more transparency. It may not be the ideal, but a fair amount, much more than what we had with the Russian experience in the past. But on the other hand, doesn't mean that just because we go with let's say a French platform, we will get all of those either. Yes, the manuals, because a lot of it is a documentation, the manuals which come, the information which comes about the platform, those are critical aspects, and those are a whole lot better from the Western platforms. But yes, Western platforms and systems, they will have certain proprietary technology on their critical systems, like avionics, the radar systems, weapon systems, secret. Those are aspects which is understandable why every nation will hang on to them. So let's talk about there's the whole business about the source codes which came up. Now, when you buy a platform, a certain number, there's this 26 in this case with the Rafale deal. I don't know the specifics of this deal. They were bought in a government to government in a bit of a hurry to fill a certain gap. So when you go into a deal like that, you buy what is available. You don't go into a long-term deal at that point in time. So obviously, access to a certain amount of information will be limited. But when you do a long-term strategic partnership, you have to build trust in an aviation industry. So if you are partnering with another country, you're collaborating with another country, you have to build the trust and faith with that company. The same Rafale company, in fact, I think the earlier Defense Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had mentioned in the public domain that the Rafale backed out because they were not happy with HAL's capability to produce those aircraft, and they won't stand guarantee for them. So that speaks volumes for our industry. So that was some time back. And I think the HAL still is, I think, a long way to coming into international standards. The Air Force has supported the HAL for the longest point in time. And where has it got us? Look at the Navy, for heaven's sake. The LCA was supposed to be for the Navy as well. After deck landing trials, the Navy declared it unfit and went and bought Rafales. So why is it that the Air Force always gets left at the short end of the stick and saying that we are not supporting Atmanirbhar Bharat? For heaven's sake, we have, despite all the body blows that the HAL has given us in the past, we have still gone ahead and supported it with the entire LCA Mark 1 and 2 orders of them. So Mark 1 A, we have got 2 orders of them, and they're still to come into our flight lines. So there is a huge issue here.
That is true. And, my personal belief is that only the one order for the Tejas Mark 1A should have been sufficient. The second order should have been for the Tejas Mark 2, right? The HAL should focus on the Tejas Mark 2 and the AMCA. Those are the 2 big programs that the HAL should focus on. Tejas Mark 1A happens, I still remember the HAL chief had claimed publicly that the aircraft would be delivered by October last year. And I had done a story back then saying that not latest by March this year, right? And the fact is that it's not going to be delivered in March also. But the Air Force chose the Rafale. Now, what are the capabilities that the Air Force has gone in for when it comes to Rafale? Why did they actually choose Rafale? At this point of time, they could have, the Russians were offering the Su-57. It is supposed to be a 5th generation fighter aircraft, right? And they're giving the so-called source code as well. At least the Russians claim so. So why did the Air Force go in for the Rafale now? Why not the Su-57 like many so-called experts on Twitter keep saying?
See, the Indian Air Force's threat perception is vastly different. Where has the Su-57 flown? It has flown in the Russia-Ukraine conflict in limited roles with certain capabilities. Okay. But do they really meet? Is that platform something which has showcased all the needs of the Indian Air Force? It possibly doesn't. We had a bad experience with the FGFA. That's why we pulled out after, I think, spending almost 325 million. But so the Sukhoi 57, obviously, Russia is hard-pressed to sell that platform to make it economically viable for them. Possibly that's why they have opened up the gates and said, we will give you everything. But it is not just the platform in itself. That's again, they will give us the Russian version of it. With their instrumentation, their avionics, their data linkages and internal subsystems, which doesn't necessarily fit into our long-term plans. Okay, so just because the commonality of the countries doesn't mean that what are we looking at today? We are looking at integrating the Russian platforms, which we have, the Sukhoi mainly, and the Western platforms tomorrow in a larger data-linked architecture, wherein we can network all these platforms. So there is a fair amount of work and thought which have already gone in. We've done a lot of work in putting Indian weapons, on the Russian platforms. Integration is a big issue. Weapon integration is another issue. So with Sukhoi, Sukhoi 57, we have to start from scratch all over again. With Rafale, we have done a certain amount of progress on that. We have come a certain way. We have flown with it operationally. We've integrated a lot of weapons on it. Okay, so along the way, it makes a whole lot more sense for the Rafale and a larger long-term deal, which gives us access to future, upgraded systems, subsystems, weapon systems, and technology, so that the platform can stay on the inventory for a much longer period of time, and at the end of the day, be able to network the entire lot, bring them all together to bring in commonality of weapon systems, and so that the platforms can talk to each other. That's the criticality of today in multi-domain warfare. That's what you need. You need systems to talk to each other, not only aircraft talking to each other, radars talking to each other, ground-based systems talking to airborne systems, and vice versa, and space-based integration as well. So I think I wouldn't know the specifics of exactly what has been contracted for in this deal. I'm sure I'll give full marks to our Air Force planners, because they have whatever said and done, and whatever image which everyone has that, oh, Air Force is buying things and a knee-jerk reaction. I'm sorry. The people who say that are talking through their hat. And I make no bones about it, because there are some partisan strategic writers who have recently trashed the Rafale and the chief, and saying that, oh, it's just the Indian air marshals like to go to France and that's why we are buying the Rafales. I mean, how ridiculous can you get? Okay, so that's it. The point I'm trying to make is give the Air Force a fair chance. Now that for the first time, in the recent past, it was finally the Parliament took note of the spiraling and dropping Indian Air Force inventory. It was flagged in the parliamentary committee. So for once, the nation has seized of this matter. If you look back in the earlier years, it was always an Air Force problem. Whereas platforms like these, and what Sindoor has shown us, that this are strategic decisions for a nation, and it's a nation's decision, not just the Air Force responsibility. The aviation industry, the HAL, should be a national responsibility. So I think what the Air Force planners would have done, and they have given a lot of thought on this. I have full faith in them, and I'm sure today, where the Indian aviation industry is shaping up, privatization coming in, I think things will change for the future. But yes, do understand, it can't happen overnight. It will take time. And I think we got sidetracked a bit on this Atmanirbharta strategy of ours. It is most certainly a strategy which is needed for the nation to be able to maintain its strategic autonomy and independence and not rely on foreign partners. But the challenge was that the Indian aviation industry was overplayed. The capability was overplayed, saying that this will meet all our future requirements. That Indian industry is running 2 decades behind today compared to what the world aviation technology is.
You're talking about HAL, because there's nobody else who's claimed it.
That's it. It is the HAL. There's no doubt about this. So I'm fully understand. It's a Maharatna. It's our industry. But I'm sorry, the industry has not reached anywhere near international standards. So the point I'm trying to make, that this Atmanirbharta and relying purely on the Indian aviation industry is and was a strategic mistake. I have written about it in so many on all my pieces, and I've spoken about it on national media, saying that we need to be more nuanced about it. Yes, Atmanirbharta in the aviation industry, in the fighter, especially in the fighters, it's a long-term strategy. But in the interim, you have no choice, because of the situation that we are, this technology gap, the time we have lost, that we have no choice but to buy foreign platforms. And I think between the two nations, you have to understand one more thing. When we buy Russia and France, were the only two reliable nations with whom we have had the longest relationship in terms of when it comes to aviation industry. Russian aircraft, it goes back to the MiG-21s, obviously. And the French, it goes back to Oregons and Mystiers and the Alouette helicopters. So we have long-standing connect with these two countries. Yes, the challenge here is that when you talk about the cost, and you mentioned the cost, that why should we buy such expensive equipment? And that's a lot of talk which is taking place. I think that's, again, foolish. I won't say foolish, I will say ill-informed statements when you don't consider the fact that you're not just buying the platform, you're contracting for its entire, from the lab, the labs, the weapon system, the support infrastructure. And if you are going to license production with this platform, then we are talking about setting up a whole lot of other capabilities with this money. So that would all be factored in into this enormous cost, which seems mind-boggling. But if we had done this 126 deal, again, I'm repeating this, 15 years ago, it would have borne out and become a cost-effective venture by now.
Yes. That is true. I think what people generally are doing is that they're calculating the 3.25 lakhs divided by the 114, and they're coming out with a figure. The fact is that, as the print reported, is the fact that there's a assembly line which is going to come up in India. This is going to be the second assembly line for the Rafale fighter jets in the world. So it's not just going to cater to the Indian orders, but will also cater to the global demand, right? There's a whole ecosystem that is coming out, right? That is coming in. So you will have nearly about 50 companies now being part of the Rafale project, and that is what I've been told, including companies like Tata, Mahindra, Dynamatic Technologies. So several other countries are to be brought in. So going ahead, do we assume that Rafale is going to be India's frontline fighter aircraft? Because right now we call that the Su-30 MKI is the frontline fighter aircraft. So in this whole picture, where does the Rafale, the upgraded Sukhois, as and when it happens, the Tejas Mark 1A and the Tejas Mark 2 fit? How does the Air Force outlook really looks?
So, Snehesh, if you really look at it, most air forces in the world, there are very few serious major powers which have only one platform. They have multiple platforms. Look at the Russians, look at the Americans, look at the Chinese, for heaven's sake. Okay, and look at the Pakistanis. They were just, okay, whether it was a strategic choice and their alignments which brought in the F-16, and they asked, forced them to look the Chinese way when the US supported right up. So I don't think it is one or the other. Both these platforms complement each other. They fill the huge gaps which are existing in our aircraft industry. Do understand our numbers are down. We are now struggling to just match the numbers. Okay. Filling in the capability and future requirement gaps will take a long time. And while that is taking place, there are older fleets which will start moving out. The MiG-29s, the Jaguars, they will go at some point in time.
Yeah,
so their replacements will come in. So unless and until you establish sort of a supply chain and a platform production capability in home, here we are looking at a balance of both a foreign collaboration and parallelly running the Indian industry. Both will synergetically, I'm very confident that both will synergetically benefit from each other. And in the long term, you will need both to meet our scale of production scale and requirement to fill our declining numbers. Because see, it's not just about buying a few platforms. It's about the production scale, the rate of production. Rafale itself had a long production line. I mean, if we had continued with the 126, we would have had probably all the aircraft by now. Most certainly. We would have had them by now. But now there are other companies which have queued in to buy the Rafale. So manufacturing in India makes enormous sense because we will also now get our priority of platforms from the assembly line.
Perfect. Thank you so much, sir, for this discussion. I know we could have continued this discussion. We've already shot the time limit that we had, but hopefully, this project will come through. Hopefully, the Tejas Mark 1A would start getting delivered and operationally deployed starting this year, and hopefully, the Tejas Mark 2, at least the HAL will live up to the promises of the Tejas Mark 2 and also the AMCA going ahead. But thank you so much, sir, for speaking to the print. It's a pleasure as always, sir.
Thank you, Snehesh. And I'll just end with one bit which I want to re-emphasize, that just going one way, just going in for the Rafale deal, unlike the past, we cannot take our foot off the accelerator. We have to have all our feet on all the accelerators possible in each of these parallelly, running them parallelly and trying to sort of short circuit the timelines as much as possible. in the near future. That should be I think, the sense of urgency in our ecosystem, in our defense ecosystem.
Well,
Thank you.
That's a sense of urgency that the government has also realized. And I think, this year, 2026, will also see certain key decisions be taken on the HAL front too. I think the HAL is also going to see a lot of changes. The government is seriously wanting to speed up the whole process and make HAL as agile and as fast as possible. But thank you so much, sir, once again.
A pleasure always, Snehesh. Thank you very much.
Thank you.